Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello everybody, my name is Minh and I'm your host for today from NDIS Property Australia here in Brisbane. And you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. Today we have three special guest speakers. They are from ArchSign from Melbourne and Collingwood. And they are our first architects on the show. Okay. Boys, welcome today.
Good morning.
Welcome, man. Thank you, man. Just correction, it's ArchSign Architecture. ArchSign with an arch.
ArchSign.com.au.
Yes.
ArchSign. No worries. Boys, introduce yourself, please. Who are you and what do you guys do?
I'm Peter Lombo. I'm the managing director, actually founding director of ArchSign. We're a firm of multidisciplined architects, having formed back in 1990, all those years ago. We run a team of 30-odd guys here. Multi-residential is where we've really started, but I suppose our expertise now is developed from all forms of residential down to the more specific SDA housing that this topic is about today.
Yep, and Maurice Giardina here, partner with Peter, director as well. Just pretty much what Pete just brushed up on, but just running a tight ship of residential through to commercial industrial work. And Andrew here's the senior designer at SDA. Handles our SDA work. Go for it.
Yeah, so I've been working at ArchSign for just over 8 years now. Recently, in the last couple of years, I've gotten into the space of SDA and accessible living, and just finding the last 12 months it's really spruiked up, and we're getting a lot of interest, and it's a space that we're actually really enjoying and seeing the rewards in what it does for the SDA community and what we can achieve through it.
Yeah, wonderful, man. You guys have a lot of awards on your website. You've done a lot of things, very multidisciplinary and listen to business, I guess. Why did you step into SDA? Was it because a client brought a project to you, or you guys looked into the sector to begin with? I mean, what's the background there? Why?
Well, I suppose if we go back in history, as I said earlier, we've been into the residential space for a long time, and for many years we've dubbed ourselves as developers architects. We're in the space for apartments and townhouses, and we tend to find that we drew our experience on speculation, and we found that we were generalizing a fair amount and had an understanding of what the common market wanted. But what we felt was lacking was the individual excitement or entertainment that we get as an office, where we're producing something as a bespoke home for somebody to reside in rather than an open market, and didn't really know who our client or audience was. I think SDA, in parallel with private home commissions, just gave us that opportunity to be connected again with an occupier rather than this anonymous person in occupying our homes.
Yep. Have you guys actually produced or finished any projects in SDA yet?
We've got some that are just about ready to obtain building permit approval. So what we have learned with SDA design and build is that it's a space where patience is important, and letting our clients and developers understand that there is a bit of a process in place on having, the right silk provider and attending to all the SDA, category requirements. And so we are finding, long process, but now we're at a point where, we've got some projects that are just about ready to get building permit approval, and we're actually really looking forward to seeing them be built and, compare the difference from, your standard residential building to an SDA building.
Gotcha. When I was in the conference with you a few weeks ago in Melbourne there, you mentioned to me that you guys had maybe 12, 13, 14 projects in the pipeline which are going through your process at the moment. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're getting, like, in the last, I'd say 6 months, we've gotten quite a bit of interest, and all over the state as well. Like we areas like in Hawthorn, where we've got an apartment complex which will be mainly suited around high physical support. We've got another one in Flemington that's going to be very similar. Harbour complex, and then we've also Altona as well, and then we've got areas in Croydon and Bendigo where we're doing a lot of sort of similar medium density developments where we've got a lot of units that are just side by side to each other, and and basically just all forms of design at the moment around it, which is great.
Sorry, Andrew, if I can jump in. I think this, we've also been evolving with this, where previously SDA accommodation was a property, and all housing within that property was SDA attributed. We're now finding that there's probably a better mix when we provide traditional housing, or that speculative housing, mixed in with some SDA. So obviously this is for the larger projects. There's a recent one in St Albans we're doing. It's only a 4-story building, 30-odd apartments. But what we're doing in this one here is, rather than 30-odd apartments, which is a large number for that property, we're really filtering it, and only a third of it are becoming SDA appropriate housing of different forms. And the rest is traditional apartment tenancy.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there a density of 15% in a site for SDA with mixed residential?
Depends who you're quoting there, Minh.
The NDIS build guidelines have a 15% density requirement. So if you're looking at a high-rise or medium-rise apartment complex, 15% of 30, I would assume, would only be 4 or 5 allowable as SDA on the site.
I thought that trigger, and I'll be corrected, I thought that trigger was from 40 and over.
No, I don't think so. You like to look into it. I think so. The rules are 15% and 15% or 15 on one location.
Oh, yeah, and or 15 in one location. But that's what I'm saying. In this one here, we have we've got about 30 apartments. A third of them is only 10. So it's still capped under the 15. So you're right on that count, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So are you guys doing mostly apartment products for SDA as projects, or are you doing any small bespoke house builds or projects, designs at all?
Yeah, we actually, funny you say that, we actually got an inquiry yesterday. It was a client called that they wanted to build their family home, but they had two of the family members will require accessibility. So that's one of the first single dwellings that's come our way. So yeah, we've mainly been around apartments and medium density, but yeah, and hence yesterday we got a phone call for a single story dwelling, and it'll be under the category of fully accessible was required.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's something we'll be looking into.
Can you also explain and educate us, our listeners, what an access consultant means versus an architect versus a SDA assessor? Because people think, I'll just go to any architect or not. So what's the definition of an access consultant, please?
Yeah, so for us, what's important for us is creating the appropriate network to be able to correspond to our clients on what is required. So, for us, like we consider ourselves, architects, but we're moving into the space of letting people know that we're linked with a network of accessible consultants and specialists that they are in their field to assist with the application. And we at an early stage get quite a number of consultants involved, and one of them being a accessibility consultant to assist on what's required. Now, they might not necessarily deal directly with the client, but it's where it gets filtered through us that, they sit with us and gauge on what's required for this design, and then we're able to explain it to our client.
Gotcha. So they do the sign-off and the vetting of the accessibility.
Correct. Yeah, that's well. Like the concept stage is quite thorough with us. Like the only time we move to the next stage, if town planning is required of the straight building permit, is having a accessible consultant sign off that what has been produced to them on this date and this time is that can be moved to the next stage.
If compliance and up there, in essence, they're an authority. So working within that team is important to know everyone's got the same intentions for the end result, and we're all on the same page working for design.
Gotcha. So my next question is, what do you do and don't do in SDA?
Okay, what do you do?
We do good. We don't do bad.
Yeah.
Are you on more?
The big do is ensuring that we explain to our client the process to obtain approval for an SDA building. We do have a lot of interest coming from existing developers, but we have to ensure to them that it is a different process, and there is quite a bit involved to get to the end goal and result. So yeah, one of the do's in particular is definitely explaining the process up front and basically explaining everyone and everything that's involved. The don'ts, I would say, is thinking it's explaining to them like, yes, it's going to be a quick process and, this is all that's involved. And more importantly, not letting them know that they have to be quite involved in the process of having the appropriate seal provider and, doing their research on the area like this. It's all about that initial assessment that's important.
So how does a normal mum and dad who wants to engage an architect to do advice and architectural work, how do they know whether a professional architect is the right person or not to engage for SDA?
Maybe we should rephrase that question. An experienced architect is really what they're seeking. There are other consultants out there who will engage the architect or have them as one of the consultants on the project to design the building, and then obviously there are other people in the process. In going direct to the architect, I would stress that they would need to be experienced as we are, and we would be providing the same services as that other SDA consultant would be providing.
Yep.
We've been at this for quite a while now. We think it's right at the infancy, and there's still a lot to go, a lot to learn still. But it will be the experience. I think you'll find that there are those coming into this game and maybe thinking of a formula or a matrix that's going to work, but they really need to dig deeper. It's not just about a return on investment. There's the maintenance that's required for these buildings as well. It's not the same as investing in a block of traditional townhouses where the tenants, through body corporate, they maintain the building. This year, the tenants have different requirements and the buildings need to be maintained in a different manner. So it may appear to be, on the face of it, a reasonable return on investment. You can't just directly correlate that to a traditional investment. There are greater expenses, and I think that's probably a large learning curve for people coming into this space.
And it's through the experience, it's the right advice that they're after. So it is the advice which is important, just at least. So that's why they would approach us,
That's right. And unlike the other traditional housing, yield is not the answer in this space. It's the right product, fit for purpose. Is the right thing to do.
Of the 13, 14 projects you guys are working on in the pipeline, how many of them will go ahead and how many will probably not go ahead? And what would be the reasons why they wouldn't go ahead?
Look, I'd say at least 80% will proceed. That small 20%, a couple of projects that are there, they're still in their initial stage that we're educating the client to understand what's involved and, the path they need to take to, even just commence the project. So it's we're very lucky that the 80% that will proceed, they've got some form of knowledge of what's required and they have engaged in their SIL provider and understand the area they need to be and have an idea of the type of tenants they'll require. Where the small percentage ones that are sort of the amateurs to the space, we're educating them on what's involved at the moment. So should they proceed, will be great. But if they don't, it'll be only on the basis that they're probably realising what's involved and they're still familiar with that common, residential build as opposed to an SDA build.
Would you turn them away from lack of knowledge or experience in this area?
We wouldn't turn them away. I think that we would just educate them and to just be open and transparent about the reality of what they're moving into. Think back what I said a little while ago. If it is an investor looking to get into this space and they've been accustomed to the traditional residential accommodation, this is something they need to get their head around, but it's not the same. There are differences. It is rewarding, but there are differences which they will need to accept.
What are these differences you refer to?
Well, as I said earlier, the maintenance requirements for these properties are substantially more than maintenance requirement for traditional body corporates. I think Andrew was kind enough to show me one of the recent projects in, in Bendigo, where we have a sensory garden for the 6 occupants of these 6 individual homes. Now, that sensory garden is not a traditional garden. It's not being maintained, just by a landscape architect or by a landscaper. It's being maintained by specialist people with equipment, and it is a specific garden for their sensory needs.
What kind of additional cost would it be for the buyer investor for that sensory garden?
Well, let's not talk about the sensory garden specifically. Maybe if we are talking about the difference financially, because that's what you're really guided. We take a look at traditional townhouses or multi-residential developments, any of that. You'll find that you'll have a body corporate management fee. You'll also have rental management fee, and that probably equates to about anywhere from 10 to 15% of the rental. You'll tend to find that these SDA homes probably are closer to 30% of the rental is what's required. So although the rent is substantially more, the expenses of maintenance are substantially more as well.
Exactly. Yep. So with your designs as architects for these SDA projects, do you normally have one OOA, or you're finding maybe you might design to have an extra 2 or 3 extra OOA rooms in the complex?
We're finding that's slightly driven by our client. A lot of our clientele, there's a bit of history and emotion to some of these projects. Some of them have got family members that require that NDIS support, and so we're finding But when we're starting to hit is, some of these apartments, for instance, that have got, between 10 to 15 rooms, like we're finding there's, all up there, an OOA is required. And even in some cases where it's not, we're finding we're encouraging for it to occur just from a overall yield on how much SDA apartments will be in place. So, but to answer your question there, we find it's very client driven. Obviously there's, the minimum requirement that's required on an SDA building, but, in some cases, some clients will want some additional.
Gotcha. Can I ask you, all three of you, what do you see as challenges in the SDA space moving forward? So I know everyone has a different answer, so I'll ask you all one by one. Peter, what do you think challenges in the long term with SDA?
The challenges
In the sector?
Yeah, in the sector. I think the challenge may be, now I know that this may sound like an unusual response, but the challenge may be that participants wanting to jump in and being matched with the right providers. I think that those coming into this space need to have a better understanding or a very clear understanding, almost needing to be, I don't want to say compassionate, but they're needing to understand why they're doing this, and it needs to come from within and not just financials. And I think the challenge is to make sure that there are always going to be enough of us that are wanting to do this for the right reasons, and that it does not become a grab for cash or business per se, because I think that, I believe that those getting involved need to have a better understanding of why they're doing it and not just for financial reasons.
Great answer. Maurice?
Yeah, look, I guess that's one of the main reasons we are getting into this space. We do want to embrace this challenge of providing this type of architecture in the SDA space, apart from general residential type construction and projects. We've done that for a long time. We're looking for new things, and to contribute into this space, the SDA space, would be something we would probably enjoy, I guess, in our contribution to the disability accommodation. So that's it. So it is the challenge that we're after, and we find it interesting. So that's where we're at with that one. So.
No worries. Andrew?
I think the challenging part I find would be is the process is linked to an existing process of obtaining planning and building approval for these projects. So it's one thing to design SDA and comply with all NDIS requirements and SDA requirements, but it's also complying with, council's requirements as well. Overlay requirements, safety requirements, all that. And even when it comes to building permit, performance solutions are something that come into place when, like, for an example, like a zero threshold, on a standard residential building, if we were to design that, we'd have to apply for a performance solution through an external consultant, which will get approved, but it is another expense, for our client. Where, SDA being zero threshold and focusing on accessibility, that's something we need to ensure to tell our client early days that this is something that, will have to be obtained. And just to link up with all that, it's also having the right network of builders that understand SDA builds as well. We're very lucky that we're associated with Harness by Matze, which they do quite a bit of work in this space, and they, having their knowledge and their experience, helps us through it, but also allows the end product to succeed.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. If I may add this also, man, I'd like to think that we do a lot of planning at this office here. And it doesn't matter what state you're in, the issues are all the same. between humans and other humans. And that is, I tend to find that we discriminate. And some of these housing projects, when we're doing the government housing, which let's say we are tenanting a person of needs, the government is fortunate where their projects are exempt from marketing or advertising in planning. Whereas, unfortunately, we'll say at this stage, any SDA housing is really private sector housing. And we walk a fine line and we really wonder how it's going to be received by local community because they're misunderstood. We don't really know what the community think these homes are going to be catering for. Sometimes perceptions are stronger than facts, and we need to just ensure that, it is a clearly understood housing type that we are providing, and it is a need in the community.
Yeah. I think with time, the people in Australia are more aware of the NDIS scheme and they're aware of what it's trying to achieve. So social acceptance of the scheme, of what it's doing, the support it's providing to the Australian population is becoming more progressive every day as we move forwards, because every night, every week, there's always NDIS articles on the news all the time. So we all know what it's all about now. I think acceptance is now more there now than 3-4 years ago, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's more of an acceptance and awareness, and that will improve with further education, further awareness that is being marketed.
So, guys, over the last 2-3 years, I've come across a lot of builders and developers coming to my office and meeting up with me and my team and asking us how this works and ideas and strategies. And, it's not for the faint-hearted. I mean, these builders and developers, they all think it's pretty easy coming into this NDIS market.
That's right.
And they walk away sort of realising after an hour or 2 hours that it is a complex field of development. Because there's just so much risk here. There's risk of, market risk, government risk, participant risk, provider risk, construction costs risk. It's not the traditional property development game. And anyone who comes into this area, they need to be very, very, thick-skinned. They got to have some good experience and some balls behind them to take on this challenge, because it's not for everyone. I mean, are you coming across over the last year or so? Have you guys come across a lot of guys who've shown a lot of interest and they walk away saying it's too hard for them? Have you come across that at all?
No, but that's what Andrew was alluding to. About 20%, 80% success. The other 20%, they just need a reality check.
Yes, exactly.
And they need to walk away. Look, they should also be considering future-proofing the development. If we expect our buildings to be constructed specifically for an intended use, there's nothing wrong with future-proofing it for an alternative use. So just because the room is required to be a minimum dimension doesn't mean you can't build it slightly bigger for an alternative market in the future. I think this is where a number of people are probably misunderstanding the whole space. It's not, we can get an occupant to take up the first lease, but they may move out in a shorter period than your expectation. And what do you do with it then?
Yep. I keep on telling all our clients that you should never ever just think building to minimum standards is enough for an SDA home or dwelling. You got to think about future proofing, having the larger space. Just do everything you can to make it future proof in every way.
Yeah.
Because the day will come when a participant moves out and moves on, because the place they're living in, which is your dwelling, is not good enough to the other newer one down the road. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's correct. There's always someone better. It's a better product.
So it's all about creating something as appealing as possible at design stage. So there is longevity with the occupants.
My final question to you, all three of you, is what kind of advice do you have for anyone out there who's looking to venture into this SDA space, whether it is a mum and dad investor or a builder or developer? What kind of advice do you want to give out there to our listeners?
Well, clearly do your homework. It's a start.
Just be patient. We all will get the result that's needed. But just having some patience around this space and going through the process appropriately.
There's a lot of moving parts that need to join.
And it's the team that's important. A one-person show won't work. So it's a collaboration. That's what's important, and everyone needs to work together and provide the result that's compliant and which is achievable in the end for everyone to enjoy the result.
Exactly. Do you guys operate Australia-wide or only in Victoria?
Yeah. Oh, look, we. A lot of our work is within the state, but we. We're open-minded, optimistic. Hey, you can maybe answer a bit on that.
Well, our practice does work nationally, so we do have work in 3 other states at the moment. Actually, 4 when you include our home state of Victoria. Although with the SDA housing, we have started with Victoria. It's really borderless, though. If we need to go in, we do have a language and dialogue that can converse with other states. Victoria is town planning. Sydney is a DA. Okay. Same thing, though. Still needing a permit.
Exactly. Guys, what's the best way to contact your office if clients want to contact you to engage you guys as architects for their SDA projects?
The best way is obviously traditional phone calls for those that are in the older space. Get in contact with our people via email. Also, look at our website. We have a prolific website. Follow us on Instagram as well. All roads lead to ArchSign, as we say.
And your office phone number and your website is?
The phone number we can go with 9427 2115. That's a 03 if you're from Victoria.
Yep.
And the website is all the W's, ArchSign, ArchSign.com.au.
Peter, Andrew, Maurice, thank you so much for your time. I think our listeners will have a better understanding now as to the mindsets of an architectural firm who are working in the SDA space. And if anyone out there who's thinking about doing either a house, a bespoke house, or a project of a 4-pack or 10-pack of apartments or whatever, please feel free to contact ArchSign and go from there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Minh.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.